Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining this webinar. Um, well, the main reason I'm doing this is because I'm a firm believer that community-based tourism is a great invention to help communities thrive to their highest potential, improve their economies, and protect the environment. And I used to have a hotel in Guayaquil for 15 years. And when I start to speak with my guests, at some point in the conversation, I would ask them if they're aware of what community-based tourism is. And most of the times, probably 90% of the times, people would have no clue what is community-based tourism. So given that I consider this something that is so useful, so good for people and for the environment, I decided that I would dedicate some energy in trying to send out the message about the advantages, not only as a way to serve while you're traveling, but also as a very unique way to travel, because the degree of connection that you can get when you are when you visit a community that is structured to receive visitors is way higher than when you travel and stay in a plain hotel, for many reasons that we will see during the presentation. So I'm going to share screen. Yeah, so the reason I call it Ecuador Best Kept Secret is what I just said, that many people are not aware that this even exists. The reason for that are many. The main one could be that the people who do this kind of tourism, they're not people from the cities, they're not business people, they're rural people basically, who sometimes are very uh, computer illiterate. Sometimes, many times, most of the time, they don't speak English. So it's a forced type of secretness. It's not that somebody designed this to be a secret jewel of Ecuador. It just happened to be like this, and I think it shouldn't be like this, because we all are aware that massive tourism is not good for any community, because it can alter the culture and it can affect the environment. However, it's not very likely that this kind of tourism attracts huge crowds, because normally you need to have certain level of consciousness, of of enjoyment for in-depth experiences, for authenticity, to really appreciate what is this about. And as you know, the majority of people in the world, they are not like that, unfortunately. But I think it's something good to share this knowledge. And if you can widespread the word, you will be helping a lot of people, and you will be helping the environment in Ecuador, as we will see during this presentation. So why do we say that Ecuador is a world pioneer in community tourism regulation? Because it was the first country in the world that approximately 10 years ago started with a regulation for community-based tourism. That means that there are certain basic norms that have to be followed by the communities in order to be, let's say, licensed to receive visitors. And even before this began to be a government policy, there was at the level of grassroots movements, mainly indigenous grassroots movements, it was already existing for the last 25 or 30 years. So community-based tourism in Ecuador was born from the indigenous movement, the very indigenous grassroots movement that has done so good for this country in terms of protecting the environment, was the one who when they saw that tourism was thriving in the world in the late 80s, in the beginning of 90s, they said, why don't we do this? Since they are used to you doing most of the things in a community way, they decided we're going to do it community-based tourism. And the reason I say that is great for connection is because you are dealing with entrepreneurs mainly So the level of commitment, the level of interest that these people have is way higher than an employee of a hotel. And the how awakened people are in these centers is is a higher degree of awakening, and I have tested that myself. I have written about community-based tourism for many years. I have visited probably more than 50 community centers that are prepared to receive tourists in Ecuador, and everywhere I find the same pattern, that people have, how can I say this word? People have like uh, an open consciousness. It's like when you travel, you leave your square meter where you were born, your mind expands because you begin to have cross-cultural experiences. Well, these people, they don't need to travel because the world comes to them. So they develop this cross-cultural understanding. They begin to see the world in a different way. They begin to appreciate what they have because they realize that people come from very far to see their place. So it's really a transformational experience for the locals. So the Minga culture was very important. Minga means a community work in Quechua. It's a word that is used for that, and the way that the indigenous movement designed this type of tourism to work since the beginning was like a minga, was like a community, and obviously they have no clue about regulations or permits, and they fell in a legal loophole. The hoteliers, the travel industry began to complain that they were doing an unfair competition, and it began, suddenly it was forbidden in Ecuador. And it was in 1992, I think, in ITB Fair in Berlin, Germany. This is one of the main travel trade shows in the world, that Napo Wildlife Center, which is a community-based lodge located in the Napo River in the Amazon, they began an award. They won an award for the best jungle lodge in the Amazon, and it was illegal in its own country. So after that shocking contradiction that this place was being awarded in Germany for being the best lodge in the Amazon, and it was illegal in Ecuador, some things began to change. The indigenous movement began to realize that they could put some pressure in the government, so this stops being an illegal activity. And that's when the FEPSE, which is the federation that manages all these centers, began. This organization, since the beginning, they began to guide the communities that wanted to start doing touristic activities, and to suggest some basic norms that they should follow in order to receive visitors. For example, in many rural places in Ecuador, people don't use toilets. People just do it in nature or in a hole in the ground. So they said, okay, if you want to receive visitors, you have to have a toilet, or people do not use pillows. So this kind of basic comfort measures began to be applied thanks to the FEPSE regulation. It was not an official regulation because it was a grassroots organization, but the communities began to receive these guidelines on how to have an experience, have to do a minimum comfortable experience for their visitors, which doesn't mean that they're going to lose their spontaneity. Actually, the concept of folklore was disencouraged from the beginning. Understanding by folklore like a show designed for tourists. If you happened to spend the night in a community where there was a fest or an anniversary of something, or a spiritual ceremony, you were lucky because you will see a spontaneous manifestation of their culture, but they would not set up something for tourists. Eventually, around 2010, during Correa government, the state recognized community-based tourism as Ecuador's greatest strength, and they created official regulation, which was very similar to the regulation that the FEPSE had been using for many years. Actually, the indigenous organization worked closely with the government in order to create this regulation. After a few years after this, there was a Ministry of Tourism in Ecuador called Freddy Ehlers that he came out with this concept of conscious travel, meaning that you travel to transform your consciousness. You travel to expand your mind and to connect to a deeper level with other human beings and with nature. So the FEPSE makes this distinction between a spontaneous festivity, what I mentioned before, like a Inti Raymi, or a special celebration that happens spontaneously in that community. That's one thing. A different thing is an artistic performance that can be set up for a determined audience by artists that live of their work and that are happy to have an audience to see their art. And third, there's a folkloric show, which is what I said before. It's like a show set up for tourists that many times doesn't have much artistic value, because its intention is not to express art from the heart of an artist, but is to entertain or to get money from people. So this kind of folkloric act is what is disencouraged in community-based tourism. So another thing that is disencouraged in community-based tourism is adventure tourism. Adventure tourism is similar because it normally happens in nature, but communities are always recommended to be as real as they are, to be as natural and spontaneous as they are. If they happen to love the idea to do a rafting activity with their old tires, they can do it, but they don't have to do it, because the most valuable thing is their spontaneity. And gifts. Normally, the recommendation for visitors is not to give gifts to the locals unless a friendship is developed, unless a one-to-one relationship is created. But always the idea is to create an equal relationship, and to avoid that local people begin to see visitors as a dollar bill, as they have expectations to receive gifts. So that's another reason the gifts are disencouraged. So the reality today is that after the new regulation started about 10-15 years ago, the government began to issue a license, which is not mandatory. A community can still operate without a license, but when they get a license, they get a free promotion by the government, which in past government, that was a better advantage, because the main thing that was promoted at the level of government about tourism in Ecuador was community-based. That changed after a few years, and in the last governments, that hasn't been paid a lot of attention, but still the system prevails. And right now there are around 40 government certified centers. My personal opinion is, if you care more about comfort or about things being more structured, you can choose these government certified centers. If you are more into even more spontaneous things, or more natural things, or helping people who need more help, it's better not to choose the government certified centers, because to be certified, even though it's free, it's a process that takes time. and time is money. People have to be cultivating and doing their work, so they have to dedicate some energy to get this certificate from the government, and not many people can do it. Right now, there are approximately 100 centers that are affiliated to the FEPSA network, and in total, there are between 100 and 200 centers in Ecuador that are prepared to receive visitors. As you can see, there are more non-certified centers. There are also regional associations. For example, in Cuenca and in the area of Azuay and Cañar, there's an organization called Pacariñán that is a grassroots organization. It's not a company. It's an organization that gathers many communities. There in the Amazon jungle, there are also few. There is one in the Central Highlands called Corduch, and there are approximately 8 or 10 organizations in the country. The information in general about community-based tourism is very scarce, is very hard to find for the reasons that I mentioned initially. Most of them don't speak English, but even in Spanish, it's not easy to find information about this. The fact that there's a language barrier also makes it more difficult, not only that people get informed, but that people can actually get there. And there's a saying that says money talks. If I have the money, I can demand to be serviced. This doesn't work in community-based tourism. If, for example, one of the reasons, if you talk to people who are into community-based, they will say that they usually do not publish their rates because they don't like that people just write them and make reservations. They like to have a little conversation with the person. They want to understand your intentions, and then they will give you their price, and they will kind of accept you as a visitor, which is kind of contradictory because if they don't speak English, that might be a barrier. But what I'm trying to say is that there seem to be like sometimes too many barriers to let people get closer to this time of activity, but I promise it's worth it because the degree of connection and the experience of being shown the natural places, being explained the natural medicine by them, by the inhabitants of these places for millennia, has much higher value than when it is a Western guide that you can also do that. So the 4 pillars for FEPSE, for the Federation of Community-Based Tourism in Ecuador, is cultural recovery, environmental conservation, strengthen the local economy, and governance. This last one, governance, is very important because for them it's critical that these organizations are managed by the people. For example, it changed in the recent years, but about 10 years ago, in Peru, the concept of community-based tourism was very different than it is here. Community-based tourism was the kind of tourism that it would a private tour operator for Lima would take a big bus, stop in a community. They will tell the people, you have 1 hour to hang around and get to know this place, and then we will leave. So it was the community was there. You still have the contact, but it was totally different because you were not in their terms. You were managed by the tour operator, and the visit was totally cold and superficial. So the benefits of community-based tourism, this is a summary of what we have been saying so far, is that when people's economy depends on conservation of their territory, people automatically become stewards of their land. So I have seen countless stories of people in these communities that you speak to them and they tell you exactly the same things. They say, I remember a few years ago before this project started, we were hunters and we were loggers and we would sell wood. But after this started, now we take care of the forest. Simple. It stops migration of youth to cities in many rural economies, especially young people. They have sometimes they complain that there's no work for them, there are no opportunities, they don't want to do such hard work as their parents to be paid very little for their agricultural products. So what they do is they migrate to the cities, or sometimes out of the country. With community-based tourism, what I have noticed is that that doesn't happen a lot. There's a lot of young people who stay there to do what most young people do in these community projects, which is to be guides. Normally, the housewives, they are the ones who provide the parents of the house, they provide the food for the visitors, and they provide the lodging. And usually the young people, they take care of the guidance. So there's work for everybody. Another benefit is that it wakes people up to heritage and cultural self-esteem. In Ecuador, there is this kind of like national low self-esteem, in the sense that people are educated with the idea that, oh, we are an underdeveloped country, we are a very tiny, small country, Europe is better than us, North America is better than us. But when the conversations I have had with people in community-based projects, people have high self-esteem. They really value what they have. They understand that Ecuador is a very unique place that has a very unique culture and a very unique environment, and they're proud of that. And that's thanks to these activities. It's a gateway to leave the survival mode. It's another way to say that it's good to fight poverty, because people get an additional income. Usually, universities say that community-based tourism should not be the main activity, but a complementary activity, which is a good remark, because the communities are encouraged to keep their traditional ways of living. If they live near the coast, to continue fishing. If they live in a fertile area, to continue doing agriculture. But they get this additional income, which is many times necessary. And it's great to empower women, because in rural Ecuador, as you may know, many times women are like second-class citizens from their husbands, who usually brings the money, and he believes that he has the right to give the orders in the house because he brings the money. Now the woman, for some reason, women are more into getting into these projects, and they begin to have an income, and they empower themselves. So another thing that is very related to all the magic that is around community-based tourism is the indigenous cosmovision, where, as you may know, they have the intuitive intelligence much more developed than many Westerns. So many Westerns, we believe that rational intelligence is the highest level of intelligence that you can reach, but there is also intuition, and this First Nation culture, they have developed their intuition very much. I'm aware that these cultures were colonized and have been oppressed for many years, but always, ever since the conquest, there's been an elite of shamans and leaders that have preserved this wisdom, and that wisdom is kind of returning to everybody. That's why people talk about the encounter of the eagle and the condor, when the indigenous wisdom is again respected in the world, and it comes back to this original place. So now I'm going to explain a little bit some referential projects that are in key areas of the country that have, for different reasons, there are very outstanding projects that they really deserve to be visited. The first one that I'm going to talk about is Agua Blanca. This is in Machalilla National Park. near Puerto Lopez in Manabí province. Um, it's an area that is not the safest area right now compared to the area of Cuenca and Loja, that is much safer. There are some crime problems in that area. However, um, if you speak to the locals and you take measures of to be careful, you can go to this area definitely. The story of Agua Blanca is beautiful because when in the 90s, in the late 80s and early 90s, the government decided to designate this area a national park, the Machalilla National Park. By that time, the vision was that human beings destroyed nature, which is partially true. Uh, so they approached this community, the ones who now run the center called Agua Blanca, and they told them, we're going to do a national park here. You have 1 year to relocate yourself. You have to go. You cannot live here because you destroy nature. So they really didn't quite understand what they meant because for some people who do conservation, every time there's less people like that, but some people can be very square and very fundamentalist, that to preserve a territory, you cannot throw a single tree. But usually indigenous peoples, they are more holistic. They allow themselves to cut some trees as long as they use that wood for a purpose that is important, like to build a house, and they will make sure that there are more trees that preserve the forest. So as long as they don't kill the species, they can kill animals if that's necessary for their diet. As long as they don't destroy the forest, they will cut trees. But the understanding of the government by that time was square, so they didn't want people there. So they wanted these people to live. They didn't leave. So things reached a point in which the only way to take them out was through force. So they decided they would dialogue with these people. Somebody came with a brilliant idea. They said, why don't we, instead of kicking them out, we find a way that they become sustainable, that they do an activity that it doesn't harm the environment. So they said, why don't we practice this thing they call community-based tourism, which they say is good for the environment. So they brought a group of scientists. I'm friend of the archaeologist who was in that group. She's called Marisabel Silva. She happens to be the director of landmark in Guayaquil's municipio. And the way she tells the story is very funny because she says that the first time they went to this territory to speak to these people, to try to find a way that they could do community-based tourism, she asked them, who are you? Who are your ancestors? And they say, their reply was funny because they said, we are the former employees of the farm of Mr. Cedeño. So that's how they define themselves. They had no clue about the Manteño Huancavilca civilization, which is their cultural inheritance. They only have awareness of their recent past, in which they were employees of a big farm. So Manteño Huancavilca was a very important civilization in the coast of Ecuador. It was so advanced, they say, that the Inca never conquered them. The Inca saw them as partners and admired them because they have high navigation skills. They were great in sailing. So they were allies of the Inca, and they were never conquered by the Inca. So after all these years, they developed a very beautiful project. This image you see in the photograph is a sulfur lagoon that they have that is very high in minerals, especially sulfur, and it's stinky. It has a weird smell, but after you get out of that lagoon, you feel like renewed. It's very healthy, all that intense bath of minerals. They have an on-site museum because there are a lot of archaeological findings of the Manteño Huancavilca civilization. They have cabins where you can stay, and they have restaurants, and they're near a very beautiful beach that maybe you have heard, that is Los Frailes beach. Actually, you can arrange with them a guided tour in which they will take you to Los Frailes beach, which is located in the Machalía National Park. It's one of the most beautiful beaches in continental Ecuador, has very clear sand. Um, so this place is definitely recommended. If you ever go to the coast, please go to Agua Blanca. Then there's Playa de Oro in Esmeraldas. In Esmeraldas, there are many community-based projects. Most of them are by Afro-Ecuadorian communities. The northern coast of Ecuador, as you may know, has a lot of Afro influence for many reasons that too long to speak now, but it has a very strong Afro presence and has some indigenous communities. So there is a river that the government of Esmeralda baptized it the cultural river trail, because you can stop in different community-based projects of different indigenous cultures and different Afro communities. So it's a very culturally very rich experience. Out of all these centers, Playa de Oro is one of the oldest and one of the best established. They have solar cabins, they have beautiful rivers. A note of caution about Esmeraldas is a sensitive area from the security point of view, because there are many places where drug is sent out from there. So just be careful. It's not that you cannot go, but if you go, plan in advance and talk to the locals to inquire whether it's safe or not to go. Then this is another project in the coast, Dos Mangas. It is located near Olón. It's an example of good governance, and it's near the Chongón Colonche Reserve, which is a cordillera that is near the coast, has a wide biodiversity, and this place is amazing. You can do horse trails. They have also an inside museum. They have many lagoons, and it's very recommended. I know the coast has some problems with security, but the same that I said in the previous two examples. Make sure you ask around that where exactly you're going. For example, if you go to these community centers, you are in the community centers, and they are communities. The drug cartels, they don't get in there because they are doing their business. So in those centers, you are much more safer that if you are in a city like Montañita or Puerto López, where things could happen. Then in between so until now we've seen the coast. Then between the coast and the highlands in the Pichincha province near Quito, but still coast, still hot land. There's Santo Domingo de los Sáchilas. It's a nation that have their own customs. They are located in a beautiful subtropic. It's kind of 500 meters high. It's like 1,500 feet high. It's still hot. The only problem with that area is that it's a little bit too commercial because it's near Quito, and they have had their own process, kind of independent from the FEPSE. That they have many centers that are very commercial. They have commercialized, for example, their ceremonies. They do limpias very openly to everybody. And sometimes the people who go, they are not necessarily people who are into a deep connection and deep understanding of the cultural nature. They just want to have fun. They just want to see a show. They do a lot of shows. However, I know a few community leaders in this area that they have projects that are much more connected with nature and much more more serious. In the photographs, you see the marimba, which is an Afro-Ecuadorian and Afro-Colombian instrument that was brought from Africa, and it's made with bamboo and chonta, and the sound is amazing. If you haven't, I really recommend it. Then we have Yunguilla, that is in the greater Quito metropolitan area. It's a Jumbo community. Jumbo is a nationality that was between the coast and the highlands. This is a little bit higher. It's above the subtropic. This landscape of above the clouds is very likely that you see in Yunguilla. It's a protected UNESCO area, and it has a model of governance that is very strong. They usually help other communities start with their projects, and it's a very interesting project. It's near Mindo. Many people are familiar with Mindo. Then near Baños, we have this community called Pondoa. You will notice that when you do community-based tourism, there are basically two ways of doing it. One is that you stay in people's houses. Another one is that you stay in cabins that are prepared for this. Each one has its own pros and cons. It actually depends on you. Some people prefer to have a little bit less comfort and more connection. Some people prefer the other way around. So it depends on your preference. Make sure you go to the right one. This place, Pondoa, it's in the skirts of the Tungurahua, Mama Tungurahua Mount, and near Baños. They do excursions to the Tungurahua. They do bicycles, and they, as you can see in the photographs, they pretty much look like a hotel, but still is different than a hotel for the reasons we talked about earlier, that you are dealing with entrepreneurs and you're dealing with people who are much more connected with their heritage and much more interested in a cultural exchange. Then we have in Ingapirca, near Cuenca, there's the Sisi Danejo ancestral community. Many of you may know what is Ingapirca. It's a archaeological site that has both Cañari and Inca ruins. Cañari was the civilization there that was before the Inca. Cañari language was lost in time after the Inca invasion. And I remember one time I went to Ingapirca with a guide from this community, Sisi Danejo, and it was a great experience. Before that, I have been there as a typical tourist, and I have joined those walking tours that are open for everybody. When the guide is extremely superficial, they say things that the Incas believed that sun was God, like oversimplifying a very deep spiritual concept of indigenous nationalities. But the time I did this experience, these ruins in Capirca with the guides from Sisi Danejo, it was extremely the opposite experience, because they really went deeper into the cosmovision of the original people there. So Sisi Danejo, they have a nice building. The photo is not that. Is a very old church that is very beautiful inside, but they have like a little hotel where people stay. So this is an example of those communities where you stay in a separate place. You don't stay in people's house. However, you can you are encouraged to visit people's house, because this is how this work. And then we have Saraguro. Saraguro is located kind of between Cuenca and Loja. There is an organization called Ricuy Network that is the one that manages community-based tourism. Is the only, practically the only self-recognized indigenous group in Loja, even though there's the Palta, that have been trying to recover their ancestral heritage, because it was lost at some point of time. But the Saraguro have always been there. It was said that they were brought by the Incas more than 500 years ago. They have been there for a while. They were originally from Cusco, and they were brought by the Inca emperor to create cohesion inside the Inca Empire. Saraguro people, they are very proud of their culture, unlike other community-based places that the tourism experience helps them awaken their heritage pride. These people have always had heritage pride. Um, their project is great. There's a website that is only in Spanish, that is visitsaraguro.com.ec. You can see it on the screen. And they have different villages where you can go. In some of them you can stay, some of them you can only do day visits. And you can, in the website, it guides you in which ones are strong, for example, in textiles, which ones do great cheese. They have museums, and they have very interesting activities, and it's all well described in the website. And in Vilcabamba, we are a group led by Finca Sagrada Association, is where I'm involved, is putting together a community-based project in Vilcabamba, where that's going to be related to another project that is in the same area, that is a conservation of reforestation project of a sacred mountain called Kunturwachana, and another project that is carried on by the same Finca Sagrada that has community gardens. And so this community project is going to allow people to stay over in the mountain. There is a cabin there, and amazing landscape, and a farm to table project connecting with the community gardens. So people in this area of Vilcabamba is very warm. Sometimes you have probably heard that in Ecuador, the coast is like one country, and the highland is like a different country, which is true. But even inside the highland, the area of Loja province is like a different country. Historically, it's a culture that has been separated from the rest of the highland until the 60s, where the first road was opened. And the fact that the valleys are much lower is not such, the weather is much warmer. It makes that people are warmer too. People are more like people in the coast are more spontaneous. So it's a beautiful experience to share with them. I'm very happy to be part of this project, and we hope that approximately in a year it will be ready to go. So we have Amasanga, that is located near Puyo. Puyo is one of the cities in the Amazon jungle. It's not far from Ambato. They've been very strong in resistance against oil. The weather is nicer in that area compared to the rest of the Amazon. In Ecuador, we always talk about the Amazonía Alta y Amazonía Baja. Amazonía Baja means lower Amazon, is where like ground level, extreme weather, like extreme heat. The area of Puyo is like 1,500 feet high, approximately 1,000, 1,500. So the weather is a little bit nicer. There are a little bit less bugs, but still you feel you are in the Amazon. Still you have those huge trees, and you have these incredible communities, which, unlike the indigenous communities in the highlands, the indigenous people in the Amazon, they were never conquered. So their character is different, because after hundreds of years of being slaves and very badly treated by the colonizers, uh, that kind of affects the mood of a culture. So in the Amazon, you kind of feel the difference in the indigenous community. And then we have Sarayaku, which is a community that I have a great relationship with. I've known them for many years because they have been a referent in all the Amazon for fighting against oil. They have been very strong because many communities, they are strong. They kind of reject these extractive industries, but at the end, they just end up complying. Or there's people, they say, no, we're not going to comply. And they were very smart. All this happened around 25 years ago when the government allowed an Argentinian oil company to get into that land. And they just showed up one day. By that time, Ecuador was signer of international agreements that talked about prior consultation with ancestral communities, which means that only an extractive project can get in if the local community agrees to let the project get in. So it was not in the law yet. Now it's in the law in Ecuador. The new constitution, the 2008 constitution, put that on the law. Well, by that time, at the beginning of the century, it was just as in international treaties what Ecuador was part of, and the government did not respect that. So the Sarayaku, they discovered that. So they went to the Organization of American State Court in Costa Rica, and they presented a suit against the Ecuadorian government, and they won the suit. So they received an indemnization, they received a public apology from the government, and of course, the oil never got into that area. Now the situation is different because we have a government that has very low respect for the indigenous traditions in Ecuador, so nobody knows what's going to happen. But until now, the area remains very pristine, and there are no signs of threats until now. And these people are so smart that, for example, all their houses have to have this traditional architecture. So you almost don't find any concrete houses there. It's very, very strange. You do find but very, very few ones. Most of them are traditional architecture, which is kind of strange because even in community, in indigenous areas, you still find the influence of Western construction. Another thing that is very impressive about the Sarayaku people is that you may be aware of the carbon credit market, in which big corporations kind of do greenwashing by buying carbon credits by reforestation projects in South America or in Africa. At some point, the Sarayaku came out and said, but this is not fair. We are the ones who are really protecting the forest. 96% or 98% of the territory of the Sarayaku is primary forest. So they're really the guardians of the Amazon jungle. And they are excluded from this carbon credit mechanism only because they are not so fundamentalistic as we were talking earlier. For example, they do cut trees occasionally. They do hunt because that's part of the diet. So for the certifiers of these carbon credits, these people do not comply because they are cutting trees and they are killing the animals. But they cannot understand that despite they cut trees and they kill animals, they are protectors of the whole ecosystem. So the Sarayaku had proposed, with the help of the University of California, a new system of carbon credits in which is kind of adapted for the communities. They understand and they accept the exceptions that the communities need for protection of their territory, and they're pushing this. It still is something very marginal, but what they want to do is to start making a profit from this carbon credit. and use that money for the projects. So Sarayaku has a beautiful community-based project, which I work with them because one of the ways that I'm helping the community-based movement in Ecuador is by organizing excursions to them. So right now I'm working exclusively with Sarayaku. I know that in the presentation I did in Vilcabamba Library, some people thought that all these communities that I have presented, I do excursions to. No, I don't. The only one that I do excursion is to Sarayaku, because I think that they have something very interesting to offer. Speaking to the leaders is a delight because they are highly smart people and they have a deep understanding of how the world functions, national politics. They have by no means a provincial understanding. They're very global in the way of understanding things. So they have created a manifesto called the Living Jungle Manifesto, called Causa Sacha. It was developed by the Sarayaku, and they basically what this manifesto says is a beautiful manifesto. Basically, what it says is that the forest is a living being with consciousness, that it has rights. So it has three pillars. That is the fertility of the land, the life in community, and the wisdom of the forest. So this is basically the base of their philosophy of life. They live in community with the forest, and for them, conservation is not a luxury. It's not an option. It's their life. Because for them, Pachamama is really their mother. So the tips that I offer for everybody who wants to go and travel Ecuador using this community-based dynamics, which I really recommend, is WhatsApp. There are many communities that are very remote. They don't have telephones, but they have internet. So, and WhatsApp is by far the best way to contact them, much better than emails. So if you get a WhatsApp of a community, make sure you write to them. WhatsApp has some translation feature that can cut a language barrier very easily. Always prefer the regional organizations because even the Ministry of Tourism doesn't have a decent catalog about with the organizations that are certified with them. But if you seek the websites of the regional organization, you can find in some of them you can find good catalogs of what these communities have to offer. And I have a newsletter where every month I send out information about a different community that is prepared to receive visitors, where I give the contact. So my idea is later to make a book that people can use to travel Ecuador with this. There are not many books in the topic. I wish there were more. That's why I'm writing one, because as I have said many times, this is the one of the best way to get to know Ecuador. Remember that this is indigenous self-governance. It's an economic activity with a huge potential to transform lives, and not only the lives of the people of the community, but also the lives of the visitors. There are some people who go to visit that they really have life-changing experiences. The pureness of the people you get to meet in these places, and the natural spaces you find are really out of this world. And this is a number one alternative to extractive industries, because oil and mining, the principal way that they have to get into a territory is to offer paid jobs, because even if they pay the basic salary, which is almost $500 in Ecuador, In the cities, it might be a basic salary, but in the rural area, you can do a lot with that money. So it's a big temptation. So if people have a different source of income where they can inject money to their economy, that be sure that you're going to be helping that community to defend itself from these extractive industries. And yeah, and the beautiful thing about this activity is that they can preserve, in a way they are paid to preserve their natural wisdom, which is big words. So this is the presentation. The idea was that I would this wouldn't take so long, but we have some time for questions. So please feel free to make questions in this moment. I'm gonna disappear for a moment because I need to connect my computer, but I'm gonna be listening.
He's disappearing for a minute, he said.
Yeah, he's listening.
Oh.
On the page where I connected to this webinar, there was a subscribe button to your monthly newsletter, but it didn't seem to work. Can you make sure that you put us on that, please?
Okay. When I also realized that button is not working for some reason I don't understand. So what I did is everybody who signed up for this webinar, I'm sending the newsletter. The next one is going to be sent out tomorrow. So in case somebody doesn't want it, just go to the bottom and click unsubscribe, and you will be automatically unsubscribed. So you're going to receive it by default.
Terrific.
Mm-hmm. So any other doubt? Elaine, we have Elaine. Yes.
Okay. In your presentation, you did not mention anything about the Shuar. Are there no connections there with community-based tourism?
They have, but I don't know them. I've been in the jungle to many places, to the Warani, which I don't mention either, but I have been there. To the Shuar, I haven't had the pleasure to be there, but I'm really interested in going. Well, I was in a Shuar community a long time ago, but for this presentation, I tried to choose the ones that were outstanding for some reason, were like referential examples, but I'm sure there should be some in the Shuar area.
I lived in Macas for 10 years, and the Shuar community there is very dominant. Many people are, as you say, involved now in the urban community rather than in their cultural communities in the inward part of the selva, in the jungle. But it was interesting to see that their attitude over the years changed, because my son has been in the area of the Shuar for 16 years now in Macas. He does speak Shuar, and initially when he went in, he teaches the Bible. We're Jehovah's Witnesses, and he goes into the community to teach the Bible. He's very tall, so he scared everybody to death when he first went in. They were just frightened because he was big. And then over the years, they have become very friendly and very helpful and very welcoming. So it's been a nice experience to get to. I have many friends in Shuar, and they're bilingual. They speak Spanish as well, and I do too. So they have been very friendly and open and told a lot about their culture.
Yeah,
so
they have a beautiful language also. My daughter, I call her after a Shuar name, Noah, and they have beautiful names.
I think their language is probably 10 times harder than Spanish.
Yeah.
It's a very, very difficult language. So it takes a long time to learn it. And even then you don't know you know it. And they're very direct. Like in Spanish, you would say to someone, would you kindly please read this? Tenga la bondad. You would say that. And in Shuar, they just say, read it. And initially they don't say please, they don't say thank you. until they mellow out, and then they begin to be integrated into the way people, like to be treated. And now it's different, but it was very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Lane. Okay, we have more questions? Okay, so no more questions. So we are near the end. Tomorrow you will receive my newsletter with the recording of this webinar. So thank you for joining me. And remember my message: when you practice community-based tourism, you are supporting directly the communities and you're protecting the environment. So if you can remember something from this hour, that should be the message. So thank you, and keep in touch.